Sorry, I saw David and David had unmuted, but we're now starting. So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second of our Friday briefings. Just in case anybody doesn't know me, my name's JW3, as you can see. I'm Head of Education at JW3. I always say it's the best job in the world, and even during this time, because it means that I have been kept extremely busy. I first met Jonathan, I think, last year, and he approached me about doing a series through the Bar-Ilan for JW3. And that's what we started last April. Jonathan organized a superb set of speakers. Many of you heard them, and started off himself. So when we were trying to take this huge list of, we could all of this in response to what's going on in Israel, where should we start? So we did some evening planning, but we also thought it'd be nice to do something online from Israel. And this seemed a good time, and so it has proved. And Jonathan was one of the first people I thought of, because you spoke so beautifully in the session. You're obviously in the right place and coming at it from a different point of view, as being part of the university. So first of all, thank you so much for agreeing to join us. I know it's not an easy ask. It's a terrible time, and sometimes doing something like this can be helpful. Sometimes it can feel like the last thing in the world you want to do. So we're very grateful. What we've found over the last, is it only 2 weeks, is that everyone needs to be connected. We were asked, those of you who heard Rynhold last week, who unfortunately can't be with us this morning, we were asked, are we not closing? Are we not worried about ourselves? Is it appropriate to keep on running things? And of course, we all felt very strongly that it was not only important, it was essential for us to keep together. And so it has proved. Numbers coming into the building have actually gone up rather than down. This is usually the most exciting week of the adult education year, because it's the start of term and new classes and new teachers and people who haven't seen each other for months over the summer. And that aspect was so important this week, as people came in and COVID rules went out, hugs were in, because we needed the tactile contact as well as being together. So thank you. That's all you need to hear from me at the moment. As those of you who were on earlier heard, Jonathan will speak for about 15 minutes. We'll open it up for questions. We're going to have about 100 people. It will therefore be much easier if you can put your questions in the chat and I will relay them. We'll be able to get through more that way. Jonathan, thank you again, and over to you. Let's see what's uppermost on your mind this morning. Sketch out what you're feeling around you, and how it has affected the university. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. So what I want to do today is I'll talk a little bit about my personal experience, but then I'll move on to try and explain in strategic and political terms what's going on. Beginning with the personal, as I'm sure you're aware, there is not a single person in Israel who doesn't know somebody who has lost someone or somebody who has been kidnapped. All of us, all of my friends of my children and my friends' children are currently sitting around Gaza waiting to do something. Some of them have already been doing something. And there is a sense of foreboding about that. Having said that, Israel's secret weapon is its society, is the sense of community. It's the sense of connectedness, which has really been under threat in the last 9 months, but now it's very, very strong. There are too many people volunteering at Hadassah Hospital. All the windows are clean. There's nothing left for them to do. You can see videos on YouTube of Israeli soldiers saying, please don't send me any more food. I've got nowhere to put it. Israeli military headquarters does not have enough beds for everyone because 120% of the people called, who were called up have turned up. In other words, huge numbers of people have turned up who were not called up. And that's a problem in itself, but it's of course a good problem. So the idea, the main purpose of terrorism is to break the morale of a society, because however barbaric and horrific, and it is barbaric and horrific, terrorism is, burning babies, raping women to death, beheading people. However horrific that is, it alone cannot destroy the state of Israel. It aims to demoralize, and it has failed. And that's very important. And at least for my kids, and I can see their nephews are here now, when they get the messages, which they get regularly from their cousins in England, it boosts morale. There's no doubt about it. So your involvement, your care, your concern, your indignation when things in England are presented in a vitriolically anti-Israel or even anti-Semitic fashion, all of that makes a difference to us here in Israel. I'm starting with that because actually the first strategic element of the conflict that is international is that it is an Islamic terrorist jihadist attack. As the President of the United States and the British Prime Minister said, it is such that it is like ISIS. It is like 15 9/11s in an area the size of Manhattan. Why have so many international actors come together? Why have they made this an issue? It's not only, although it is, personal conviction and moral disgust, particularly with President Biden. It's also because they fear a demonstration effect. That is, if Hamas is able to succeed at terrorizing Israel and being seen to be successful, others will do so as well. And that might be in Syria, it might be in Iraq, it might be in Jordan, it might be in Britain, it might be in America. You know, people remember what happens when the jihadis from Syria come home to Britain. And so this is seen as a strategic event of global importance. That's number one. Number two, President Biden speaks of defending the free world. And Israel is clearly part of the free world. And so if we want to live in a world which is decent in some sense, then for him, what's going on with China and Taiwan, what's going on with Russia and Ukraine, and what's going on with Israel and Hamas is all part of the same strategic story. In other words, while we've all sobered up to the idea that you cannot democratize Iraq or Afghanistan, what you can do is protect the free world. Countries, states which are already firmly democratic, they're able to protect themselves, they're able to secure themselves, but they need assistance. And that is what this is about. And I think there are a couple of things that the president has done which are very important in this regard. The first thing is he's removed the moral equivalence. This is ISIS. This is the most amount of Jews murdered in a single day since the Holocaust. This is 15 9/11s. And by doing that, he's removing the framing which says, proportionality, which is a nonsense the way it is understood in the media. It does mean something serious, but not the way the media presents it, because the way the media presents it would be ridiculous, which is if Hamas rapes 100 women, then Israel can rape 100 women. This is stupid and immoral. So he's removed that sense. He's made a difference between legitimate, moral, responsible, necessary war aims and illegitimate, immoral war aims. And that's important not only for Israel, that's important for every democracy that has to fight against these type of enemies. And the second thing he's done is remove the sense that you can talk about a humanitarian situation without relating to the political structure in which those people live. There is no such thing as the Palestinians in Gaza being in direct conflict with the state of Israel. Israel is in conflict with Hamas. It is not in conflict with the population of Gaza, which has no agency of its own in this conflict. And why that's important is because if you want to improve the situation of those people, yeah, you have to destroy Hamas. It would, not doing so would be like the equivalent of going to Berlin in 1945 and stopping because you're worried that you're going to kill too many civilians. In other words, of course, it is absolutely critical that Israel does not target civilians, but civilians will die however good our targeting is, because the enemy deliberately puts them in the way because they want to use that to prevent their defeat, and putting them in harm's way tells us all we need to know. So yes, the president has emphasized that Israel must make 100% effort, yeah, to avoid as many civilian casualties as possible. But he understands the reality. And when the Americans defeated ISIS, and ISIS told the populations of those areas to stay, the American military said to the mullahs in those areas, if you stay, be it on your head. We're telling you, get out the way. We're not going to stop. Okay? And the same with humanitarian aid. President Biden has said, we got to supply it, but if Hamas takes it, we're stopping it. Okay? So when you have a moral, legitimate war aim, you do have to pursue it as morally as you can, but you cannot stop, yeah, because of the way the other side tries to put civilians in harm's way. And that is not just a thing for Israel, that is a global thing about how democracies protect themselves. The second thing I want to talk about is the regional implications of what's going on. The timing of this is related to the process which is advancing for Israel's normalization into the Middle East, the normalization of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. This is a serious threat to Iran and Hamas, not only in terms of military and political power. In other words, it helps us defend ourselves against common enemies, but also because Hamas and Iran want to own the religious symbolism of Islam. They want to define that because it gives them a lot of influence. And if the most prestigious Muslim country, the keeper of the holy places, makes peace with Israel, it is presenting an alternative vision of Islam which directly threatens them and their influence. A Shiite country like Iran cannot garner support in a Sunni majority Middle East unless there's a common enemy like Israel. Now, within this, yeah, we know that Iran provides weapons to Hamas. It helps them develop their military strategy, and that they're in regular communication. And also that Hamas understands that it cannot defeat Israel alone. Its goal here was to trigger other fronts, Israeli Arabs, as in 2 years ago. It hasn't happened yet. And the leader of the moderate Muslim party in Israel, Mansour Abbas, has come out very, very clearly against what happened and standing by Israel's Jewish citizens. Long may that continue. They would like the West Bank to get involved. Mainly, they would like a two-front war with Hezbollah. But there's also the Houthis in Yemen who have been firing missiles in our direction. And they will try and attack American and Western forces throughout the Middle East because they want to change the order in the Middle East. They do not want a pro-Western model of economic development, which is what the Gulf states are working on with Israel. I mean, for the UAE, in many ways, the economic relations with Israel are actually more important than the Iran bit, although that's not true for Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. So they want to upend the whole region. Now, obviously, countries like Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates are not democracies, but they are becoming freer. In other words, they are moving in a positive direction. And that is not something that Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah want to see. And because oil is still critical to the world economy, in other words, the world economy will stop if oil does not come out the Middle East. You won't be able to get money out the wall. Industry will grind to a halt, and that will threaten the political stability of the world. Therefore, if this goes regional, it is a global threat. And it's interesting that the Russians are siding with Hamas because, of course, if oil doesn't come out of the Middle East, the price of oil goes up, and that's great for them. And it also creates chaos in the West, which is also good for them. What's perhaps more interesting is the silence of the Chinese. Now, the Chinese are totally dependent on energy coming out of the Middle East. They are the #1 purchaser of both Iranian and Saudi oil. So when America threatens to get involved with its 2 aircraft carriers and its 500 fighters that more than double Israel's aerial capabilities, right? Israel has about 300 and something fighters. Okay, what it's saying is America could end up hitting Iran's oil fields. That's not something that's being said publicly, but it might be being said privately. And that could make China use its leverage with Iran. Because if China doesn't buy oil from Iran, then Iran's regime will be in difficulty. And if oil doesn't flow from Iran to China, then China's regime may be in difficulty. So the last thing I want to talk about is what happens next in Gaza. Well, the first equation to understand is the greater the Israeli victory in Gaza, the more Hamas is destroyed, both militarily and as the authority, the political authority in Gaza, the greater the chances for a successful reconstruction and a better future for everyone in Gaza, aside obviously from everyone in Israel. There is no stomach in Israel for reoccupying Gaza indefinitely. There might be a bit in the government, but not among the public, and certainly not among most of the government. The strategy of Netanyahu, which was to mow the grass, in inverted commas, that is to contain Hamas and to just degrade its capability, is morally and strategically bankrupt. Israelis will not return to live in the area around Gaza under the kind of threat that they now feel is palpable. People can put up with rockets. They cannot put up with their children not being able to go on the street and fearing that some terrorists are going to burst in their home and murder their family. So there has to be a change of regime, but it cannot be like Iraq. We cannot simply replace the whole of the Hamas administration in Gaza. What we can do is get rid of the top people, the serious Hamas people, and leave in place the lower level administrators, the lower level police, particularly on a local level. The international community can fund and can be involved in the reconstruction, but only in the initial phase. Only Israel can provide the secure environment for reconstruction to take place. Think of it like this: no Arab state and no Western state will be willing to fire or be fired upon in Gaza. Given that, chaos will ensue. The only force that is willing to do that is the IDF. But the IDF must set a date within a year after which it leaves, because otherwise we will drift into the quagmire. In that year, we have an opportunity. Now, it may well be that it fails because Israel doesn't have any great opportunities, but there is one, and that is to try and bring back not the Palestinian Authority that is now in existence in the West Bank, which is corrupt, deeply unpopular, weak, and increasingly authoritarian, but to bring back people who are associated with the Palestinian Authority in general, but are not active primarily now in the leadership in the West Bank. And I'm thinking of Salam Fayyad, the Palestinian prime minister 15 years ago, who succeeded in boosting the economy, boosting the rule of law, boosting law and order. In other words, he has, in Hebrew we say the kabbalot, the receipts. He has succeeded bringing in those kind of people under the banner of the PA, but without the bad habits. That is an opportunity, and folding that into Israel's normalization in the region with easing certain things, improving certain things also in the West Bank for the Palestinians, provides an opportunity for Israel. I'm not going to tell you there's a huge chance of success. I'm only going to tell you that the alternatives are worse. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Okay, we've got a few questions, obviously. So Jacqueline asked, first of all, the sense of greater community that you talked about at the beginning, does that include the Haredi and the Hasidim and
yes,
usually a separation? Has it brought people
yes
together?
Yes, it definitely does. You can see a number of Haredim actually wanting to be drafted, maybe not huge numbers, but they're acting of their own volition. They've turned up. You can also see Haredim taking food and pizzas to Israeli soldiers. So yes, they're definitely included in this.
Excellent. And unless I missed it at the beginning when I was sorting out my paperwork, the students at the university, is the university actually open? Are students coming in?
Sorry, yes. Every student in our university, all 20,000, have been contacted by either the administration or the lecturers, and in many cases both. And that is probably that each student will by the end of next week have received at least 2 phone calls and 2 emails. We are building up a picture of which one of our we know where our students live, so we're already dealing with those who live in the Gaza envelope, as it's called, and there is a hotline available for people who need psychological or practical assistance. There are also psychologists and social workers being made available from our Department of Psychology and Social Work. The university is not functioning. The academic year is being postponed for another 2-3 weeks. Then we'll see what happens with that. Although, you know, we're functioning in other ways, as I've indicated.
Yeah, I had assumed that because I know the schools had not opened, but we hadn't had chance to hear from someone on it. So thank you. Here's a question. Well, I'll give you two at the same time because they're interesting, just to see if you have another take on it. They're kind of, is Netanyahu the best man for the job? Not much choice. And the second question is, given the current situation, do you think a two-state solution is possible in the longer term? And you've got 4 minutes to answer that.
Lovely. Okay, so look, this is my personal view, but he is certainly not the right man. For two reasons. First of all, it's his strategy that's been shown to be bankrupt. In other words, it was his strategy that we could contain Hamas. That does not mean he is the only person responsible here, but it's telling that everybody else in the army, all the head of intelligence, the head of this and the head of that, has taken responsibility and he hasn't. He didn't turn up to meet with anyone for several days. He tried to delay the formation of a unity government. Members of his government have been chased out of hospitals when they visited. His strategy in domestic politics in the last 9 months has been to divide Israelis and delegitimize some of the very people who, although they are no longer IDF officers, put on their uniform, went down to Gaza, grabbed some people behind them and went in and saved people's lives off their own back. I'm thinking of Yair Golan, if anyone. And so he will be the prime minister. It will continue. There's nothing we can do about it. And nor should we try now to change it. We're in a war. We have to concentrate on winning. That's it. We don't want to talk, you know, publicly in a political way about any of this stuff. But yes, there will have to be a reckoning. Whether we will succeed, that's a whole different ballgame. Listen, the two-state solution is a bit like the Messiah. You have to believe in it, even though it's not coming tomorrow. The reason for that is that all other alternatives are a lot worse, and you need a vision, because if you don't have a vision, some other vision will take its place. What we can do is retain the future ability for a two-state solution or for some kind of partition. That is doable. 60% of the West Bank is what we call Area C, which is under full Israeli control. 40% is under either civilian or full Palestinian control. What Israel can do to shift the reality on the ground is to transfer parts of Area C, not the settlements, right, not the security areas that are very important, to the Palestinian Authority. And that will change the logic on the ground from a sort of shift, a slipping into a one state, it's not a solution, a one state disaster, yeah? And it will shift it so that we move in the direction of a two-state partition. And we can do that by transferring civilian control and not security control of those areas. The other thing that we can do, and this is related to Gaza, is try and make Gaza a success. Because if that success in improving everyday life for Palestinians becomes associated with the forces of moderation in the region that want normalization with Israel, that will help. There is not going to be a final status agreement for a long time, but it's not all or nothing. If anything, what we've learned from this is the idea that you can manage the conflict without having some kind of endpoint that you're aiming to, however distant, is not an answer.
Okay, Thank you. It brings us beautifully to 9:30. Jonathan, thank you so much. So informative and just what we needed at this point in time. Thank you. Good luck with all the students and good luck with yourself. Trust your family will stay safe and together. Anything we can do from here, obviously you need to just ask. Feel very connected with you and Bar-Ilan. It's nice to see you on screen. I wish it were for other reasons.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, audience. Thank you for coming. And thank you for I'm just getting a few comments saying thank you, that was fantastic. Thank you for really helpful perspective on the current situation on the chat. So obviously appreciated. So JW3 will continue to program. Monday evening, we have a partner event with the JC with their journalists, Howard Jacobson, Melanie Phillips, Tanya Gold, and Jonathan Friedland. And that is sold out in the building. Therefore, we have opened it up online and you can now book on the same link. You can book an online place. So obviously, welcome to people in Israel as well. On Wednesday evening, we have Haggai Siegel, which was a planned event looking back 50 years on the Yom Kippur War, but we'll add in all this new conflict as well. And then next Friday, I have just got to confirm the speaker before I announce it. And I will then hopefully give you 3 at one time. So we'll do the next few weeks. We will continue these for as long as there is people are coming to it and people are willing to speak. So Jonathan, we hope to invite you back and that the situation will be slightly better. We wish you a very Shabbat Shalom and look forward to hearing from you soon. Everyone else, also Shabbat Shalom, have good weekends and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Judy.